Hey guys, welcome back. For those of you who are new here, my name's Catherine. I'm working on restoring a 1967 Ford Mustang. So my goal for today is just to take apart the oil pan once again because my rear main seal is leaking. I should have replaced it when I had the oil pan off the first time, but it completely slipped my mind. So today I'm just going to be taking it apart and trying to figure out what exactly needs to be replaced. Supposedly they're pretty easy to replace. You can just rotate them out rather than dropping the whole transmission. But today I'm just going to try to get an idea of what I've got going on down there so I can order some parts and replace it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I really hope you enjoy. So I started by removing the cross member from under the oil pan. It's connected by two large bolts on either side of the car. Once I had this out, I then started working on removing the starter. Alright, so the next step I'm going to take is to drain the oil. All you have to do is remove this oil drain plug at the bottom side of the oil pan. Because I've hardly used this oil since I put it in last time, I'm just going to be putting it in this clear bucket that I've cleaned, and I'm going to use that to put it back into the car rather than buying new oil because it just doesn't make sense. If you do have oil that's used, please take it to a place like Ace or Advanced. They have free recycling for fluids, and it's much more environmentally friendly than just trying to get rid of it on your own. So, alright, let's get started. So the oil has finished draining. I'm just going to be putting the oil plug back in, and then I'm going to start taking apart the bolts on the top edge of the oil pan and then just going to wrestle it out. It is a really tight fit. Some people do choose to take apart the steering assembly on these cars before they remove the oil pan. I'm just choosing not to do that because I've done it before without taking apart the steering assembly, and from what I've heard, it's kind of a bitch. So the oil pan is mounted by 22 bolts total, 4 of which are 1/2 inch and the rest are 7/16. Ah! You don't know the word fun until you've wrestled an oil pan out of a late 60s Mustang. Prove me wrong. I will get it though. Alright, so in order to access that rear main seal, I'm going to have to remove these two bolts here and just take that piece out. Well, these are really tough to get loose. But once you pop them loose, I mean, they just thread right out. Okay, so even with those bolts out, the rear main cap is really tough to get off. So I've come up with kind of a plan. I'm going to be sticking this little dowel, metal dowel, I don't know what to call it, up in one of those bolt holes, and I'm just going to kind of wiggle it and see if it falls out. Yes! Alright, so while I have this out, I really wanted to point something out to you guys. So this piece here, this is what I'm going to be replacing. It sits on that channel in there, but you see how it sits flush, like it's not poking out on either side of the channel here? It's actually not the correct way to install these things. Technically, they're supposed to be sitting like 3/8 of an inch out on one side and like inside the channel about 3/8 of an inch on the other. So when you install the top half of the ring, it's kind of like clocked a little bit, so it should help with leaking. It could be one of the reasons why it's leaking now. It's also probably just a pretty old seal, so it makes sense that I'm replacing it now anyway because the car is 55 years old. So I'm going to start taking these out. Next, I'm just going to have to order a new one, and then next week all I have to do is put it back together, put the oil in the car, run it, and see if it leaks. Hey guys, so it's day 2 and I'm still trying to get the top half of that seal out, but it looks like it's not budging. So I went online and I found some forums, people talking about what they did. Unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to remove or loosen the other main caps under the engine and drop the crankshaft like a little bit to get some wiggle room there. and then I'm just gonna keep trying to push the seal through. Hopefully that gives me enough room to push it out. So I'm gonna keep working on this and I'll update you guys if I make any progress. Oh my god. You guys are not going to believe what I just did. You see that? I cracked my socket. It's broken in every single corner, it's cracked. And I'm pretty sure this is the only one of that size that I have. And I'm certain that nobody's gonna be open right now because it's pretty late. So I'm totally screwed. God, this sucks. Oh my god, who would have thought that that could happen? I found another one. And this one isn't like literally older than I am, so let's keep working. Oh my god. Holy shit, that did not just happen. Yeah, so that happened. I did get it out pretty quickly, but I'm pretty sure I'm cursed by the automotive gods. I think that they're up there laughing at me. This has been quite the day, but we're gonna keep on working. So in order to get to the last main cap, I did have to remove the oil pump. As you can see here, it's just attached by 2 bolts up at the top, and it is really easy to get off. In order to get the belt loosened, you need to loosen a bolt on the alternator. It's the one that sits right on this track here. It's hard to get an image of it. Loosen that so you have some motion here, and that will loosen this belt just enough for you to slip it off like that. Hey guys, so I'm actually editing right now, but I forgot to mention that you should not use anything to pry the crankshaft away from the block. You can use your hands to pull down on it a little bit, but the clearance that you're gonna get is so small that you probably won't even notice it move. This process did work for me. I was able to get the top half of the seal out once I removed all of the main caps and pulled down a little bit. But like I said, just make sure you're not using anything to pry it because you could end up damaging your crankshaft and you really don't want to do that. So I finally got the top half of the rear main seal off, but it did take me a long time. I know for you guys it'll probably seem like it was a couple of minutes, but I did end up having to come back for a 3rd day to try to get it out. So I do have a couple of tips if you're going to be doing this yourself. First of all, I went out and I got a pin punch. Make sure that you get one with a flat circular head like this. I got the size 1/8 because it is about the same size as that metal piece inside the seal. That definitely helped me because first I was going at it with a regular punch and a hammer, and I created a crater on one end of the seal, which compressed it into the sides of the channel. And I think ultimately that made it a lot harder for me to get it out. Also, hit it with some PP Blaster, and when I say hit it with some PP Blaster, I mean spray the out of it, and then let it sit for like 30 minutes to an hour before going at it. And I think honestly that should save you guys a lot of time if you're doing this job yourself. I do wish that I had done these things before I took off the main caps because I might have been able to get it out regardless, but either way, it's not that difficult to remove the main cap. So on that note, I'm going to start putting in the new rear main seal and putting it back together. I started by taking each of the main caps and cleaning them with an engine degreaser. So as you can see, there is still a buildup of where someone must have put former gasket in between these surfaces in the past. It is really important that I get this off before I install it in the car so as to avoid any leaking. So to do that, I'm going to be taking some Scotch-Brite and I'm going to clean each of these machine surfaces on each of the main caps before I install it. It's important that I avoid putting any scars or gashes in the metal because that can also cause leaking. I also went in and cleaned the channel where the seal sits. And this is how it looked when I was finished. Next, I did the same to all of the other main caps. Now that I've got all of these as clean as I can possibly get them, I'm going to be doing the same to the bottom side of the motor where those surfaces meet. So I'm going to be taking my Scotch-Brite and my engine degreaser, and I'm just going to go in there and clean them up as best I can. And then we're going to get started on installing the new rear main seal. So I have lubed the seal and the inside of the track here with some assembly lube to make it a little easier to install. It's important during this step that you ensure that the lip on this seal faces towards the front of the block. Or if it's easy for you to visualize, face it towards this bearing here. Now that I have the seal flush, I'm going to use my punch, which I've already marked at 3/8 of an inch, to push the seal through and measure when to stop. And I used the same method to install the top half of the seal. Now that that main seal is installed and clocked where I want it to be, I'm going to be using some Anaerobic sealer, and I'm going to take a tiny amount and just run it around this edge here to help keep it from leaking. I finished up by putting some assembly lube on that bearing before putting it back in the car. So the Felpro seal that I bought specifies that you are supposed to put a tiny little bit of forma gasket on each end of the two-piece seal. But make sure if you're doing this job yourself that you check the instructions on the seal that you bought and make sure that that's what it asks for, because you might end up having a seal that does not require this and it could cause leaks. So I did one tiny little dab of forma gasket on the end of that seal out of the car, and I'm going to put another tiny little dab on the one that's in the motor. I also recommend that you put a bit of assembly lube on the threads of your bolts so that you get an accurate torque rating when you torque these down. Okay, so I got all of those main seals back in. It was very exhausting. 70 foot-pounds is a lot of torque when your torque wrench isn't very large, and the hydraulic jack handle does not fit over the end of it, so I really just had to wrestle them in. But I got them all in. They're all torqued down. Next, I cleaned the machine surface on my oil pump and installed the new gasket before bolting that back on as well. Then I cleaned up the surface of my oil pan and reinstalled it with the rubber gasket. These are torqued down 9 to 11 foot-pounds. I finished up by bolting up my starter and my alternator and filling it up with oil, and then it was ready to start. Alright, I'm in church. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like and comment, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more stuff like this. Also, I post more frequently on my Instagram and TikTok, so I'll put them right here. I'll also link them in the description, so please go check that out as well, and I will see you guys very soon.